Welcome to today's episode of Ancient Mysteries Unveiled. Picture this. You're standing in a vast, untamed wilderness 100,000 years ago. Towering trees stretch endlessly in every direction, their canopies so thick that sunlight barely touches the forest floor. The air thrums with the sounds of creatures that would dwarf today as the largest animals. Massive ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and woolly mammoths moving through the underbrush like living mountains. Now imagine a small group of early humans, armed with nothing more than stone tools and flickering flames, not just surviving in this primordial world, but completely transforming it. These weren't passive victims of their environment. They were the world's first ecosystem engineers, wielding fire like a paintbrush to redesign entire landscapes according to their needs. How did our ancestors, with their primitive technology, manage to control forces of nature that seem beyond human reach? How did they turn hostile, impenetrable forests into productive hunting grounds and livable spaces? The answer will challenge everything you thought you knew about early human capabilities. This isn't just a story about survival. It is about the moment our species discovered we could reshape the very fabric of nature itself. From the shores of Lake Malawi to the vast forests of prehistoric Europe, early humans left their mark so permanently that we still live in landscapes they designed. Today, we'll uncover the revolutionary techniques that allowed our ancestors to become masters of the wild forests, setting in motion changes that would echo through millennia and ultimately lead to the rise of civilization as we know it. Chapter 1. The First Spark of Revolution. The story begins over 2 million years ago in the sun-baked savannas of East Africa, where our ancestor Homo erectus first gazed upon something that would change the course of human history forever: fire. But this wasn't just any fire. This was the moment our species discovered that the destructive force that terrified every other creature could become humanity's greatest tool of transformation. Lightning strikes were common across the African landscape, igniting vast grasslands and sending wildlife fleeing in panic. While other animals ran from the flames, early humans began to notice something remarkable. In the aftermath of these natural fires, the burned areas attracted grazing animals seeking the fresh, tender shoots that emerged from the ashes. The fires also revealed hidden resources: roasted nuts, weakened trees ready for harvesting, and clear pathways through previously impenetrable vegetation. Archaeological evidence from sites like Chesawanya in Kenya reveals that by 1.4 million years ago, early humans were deliberately creating and maintaining fires at temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius. These weren't accidental campfires. They were sophisticated, controlled burns that required careful planning and deep understanding of fire behavior. The red clay clasts found at these ancient sites tell a story of humans who had moved far beyond simply using fire for warmth and cooking. The breakthrough moment came when early humans realized they could capture wildfire and carry it with them. Imagine the revolutionary impact of this discovery. For the first time in Earth's history, a species could transport and deploy the power of fire at will. They developed fire-carrying techniques using slow-burning materials like animal dung, fungal tinder, and specially prepared wooden brands that could smolder for hours during long journeys. But carrying fire was only the beginning. The real transformation began when early humans started using fire as a landscape modification tool. They observed how natural fires created mosaic patterns in the environment. Some areas burned completely, others partially, and some remained untouched. This patchwork effect created diverse habitats that supported different types of plants and animals, essentially creating a natural supermarket of resources. Early humans began to replicate these patterns intentionally. They would set controlled fires during specific seasons, carefully timing their burns to achieve maximum benefit. During the dry season, when vegetation was most flammable, they could create large clearings. During wetter periods, they could manage smaller, more controlled burns that would selectively remove unwanted vegetation while preserving valuable trees and shrubs. The cognitive leap required for this level of fire management cannot be overstated. It demanded understanding of weather patterns, plant growth cycles, animal behavior, and fire dynamics. Early humans had to predict how fires would spread, which areas would recover quickly, and how different plants and animals would respond to burning. They were essentially conducting large-scale ecological experiments, learning through trial and observation how to manipulate entire ecosystems. Evidence from Kesem Cave in Israel shows that by 400,000 years ago, humans weren't just burning landscapes randomly. They were using fire with surgical precision. Different types of stone tools were heated to specific temperatures for different purposes. Blades were heated to 259 degrees Celsius, flakes to 413 degrees, and specialized tools to 447 degrees. This level of temperature control demonstrates sophisticated understanding of how heat could be used to improve tool-making materials. The social implications of controlled fire use were equally revolutionary. Fire management required cooperation and coordination on an unprecedented scale. Someone had to gather and prepare combustible materials, others had to monitor wind conditions and plan burn routes, and still others had to guide and contain the fires. This collaborative effort fostered the development of complex communication systems and shared decision-making, processes that would become hallmarks of human society. Fire also extended the usable hours of each day. For the first time, humans could remain active and productive after darkness fell. They could work on tools, share information, plan future activities, and maintain social bonds around the warming glow of controlled flames. This expanded productivity gave fire-using humans a significant advantage over their non-fire-using competitors. The psychological impact was equally profound. Controlling fire meant controlling one of nature's most feared forces. Early humans were no longer at the mercy of their environment. They had become active participants in shaping it. This shift from reactive survival to proactive environmental management represents one of the most significant cognitive developments in human evolution. Archaeological sites across Africa and beyond show clear evidence of this fire revolution spreading wherever early humans traveled. At Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, layers of ash and burned bones dating back 1 million years reveal sustained, intentional fire use. Similar evidence appears in Georgia's Ninisi site and Israel's Ubaidiyah, marking the path of human expansion across the Old World. The transformation wasn't immediate or universal. Different human populations adopted fire management at different rates and developed varied techniques suited to their local environments. But once the knowledge spread, it created an irreversible change in the relationship between humans and nature. We had crossed a threshold from being just another species struggling to survive to becoming active architects of our environment. This mastery of fire would prove to be the foundation for everything that followed. It enabled our ancestors to venture into previously uninhabitable regions, tackle larger prey, process tough plant materials for food, and begin the long journey toward technological sophistication. Most importantly, it gave them the power to reshape forests on a massive scale, turning wild, chaotic landscapes into managed, productive environments that could support growing human populations. Chapter 2. Burning down the ancient world. By 85,000 years ago, early humans around Lake Malawi in eastern Africa were orchestrating one of the most dramatic environmental transformations in Earth's history. They weren't just using fire. They were wielding it like a weapon against the ancient forest itself, permanently altering landscapes that had existed unchanged for hundreds of thousands of years. The evidence lies buried in layers of mud at the bottom of Lake Malawi, where researchers have extracted drill cores reaching back over 600,000 years. These cores tell an astonishing story. For millennia, the region had followed predictable patterns. Dry periods would reduce forest cover. Wet periods would allow forests to recover and spread. This natural rhythm had persisted through multiple climate cycles, creating a stable, resilient ecosystem dominated by dense, closed canopy forests. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Around 85,000 years ago, the mud cores show a massive spike in charcoal deposits, evidence of unprecedented burning. But here is what makes this discovery revolutionary. This charcoal explosion occurred precisely when climate conditions should have favored forest recovery. The rains had returned, vegetation was thriving, yet instead of regeneration, the forests faced an inferno. For the first time in more than 500,000 years, the natural cycle was broken. The forests didn't recover after the fires. Instead, they were permanently replaced by the open woodlands that characterize the region today. Archaeological sites from this exact period show dense clusters of stone tools, millions of artifacts that mark the arrival and establishment of early human populations in the area. The scale of this transformation is breathtaking. Early humans had discovered they could prevent forest recovery by timing their burns strategically. As soon as new growth appeared after the rains, they would set fires to burn it away. Year after year, decade after decade, they maintained this pressure until the original forest ecosystem collapsed entirely. This wasn't accidental burning that got out of control. The patterns in the drill cores show systematic, repeated burning over thousands of years. Early humans had developed what modern ecologists call pyrodiversity, the deliberate creation of varied habitats through controlled burning. They were essentially creating a mosaic landscape with patches at different stages of recovery, maximizing the variety of resources available to them. The technique they used was brilliantly simple, yet devastatingly effective. Instead of allowing natural seasonal fires to burn randomly, they took control of the timing, location, and intensity of burns. During the early dry season, when conditions were perfect for controlled burning, they would systematically fire different sections of the landscape. This created a patchwork of burned and unburned areas, each providing different types of food and shelter. Young burned areas attracted grazing animals seeking tender new growth. Partially burned zones provided mixed habitats with both open areas and remaining tree cover. Unburned patches served as refuges for forest-adapted species and sources of seeds for future regeneration. By managing this complex mosaic, early humans created a landscape that supported far more diverse wildlife than the original uniform forest. The animals they hunted included waterbuck, hartebeest, springbok, zebra, and various antelope species. But the burning strategy provided benefits beyond just improving hunting grounds. Fire removed dangerous predators' hiding places, eliminated poisonous plants, cleared travel routes, and reduced the insect populations that thrived in dense forest undergrowth. Modern studies of hunter-gatherer societies provide insights into how these ancient burning strategies might have worked. Australian Aboriginal peoples use similar techniques, creating what anthropologists call fire stick farming. They would carry burning sticks as they traveled, setting small fires at strategic locations to maintain the landscape according to their needs. The resulting environment supported much higher populations of preferred game animals than unmanaged forest. Early humans around Lake Malawi were conducting the same type of landscape engineering, but on an unprecedented scale. They weren't just modifying small areas around their camps. They were transforming entire ecosystems across thousands of square kilometers. The mud cores show that charcoal was washing into the lake from throughout the watershed, indicating that burning was happening across the entire region. The social organization required for this level of environmental management was remarkable. Coordinating burns across such vast areas required sophisticated planning, communication, and cooperation. Different groups would have needed to coordinate their activities to prevent accidental fires from destroying carefully managed areas. They had to develop shared protocols for when, where, and how to burn. This coordination also required extensive ecological knowledge passed down through generations. Early humans had to understand plant growth cycles, animal behavior patterns, weather systems, and fire dynamics. They needed to know which plants recovered quickly from burning, which animals preferred burned versus unburned areas, and how different soil types and slopes affected fire spread. The long-term success of their strategy is proven by its permanence. Unlike previous environmental changes that reversed when climate conditions shifted, the landscape transformation initiated by early humans 85,000 years ago has persisted to the present day. The forest never recovered, even during subsequent wet periods when climate conditions favored forest growth. This permanent change had cascading effects throughout the ecosystem. The loss of closed canopy forest altered soil composition, water retention, and nutrient cycling patterns. Species adapted to forest environments, either went extinct locally or were forced to relocate to remaining forest patches at higher elevations. New species adapted to open woodland environments moved in to fill the vacant niches. Archaeological evidence suggests that this environmental transformation was so successful that human populations in the region exploded. The density of stone tool sites increases dramatically during this period, indicating that the modified landscape could support much larger human populations than the original forest. This population growth would have created additional pressure to maintain and expand the burning programs. The technique spread beyond the Lake Malawi region as human populations expanded. Similar patterns of forest conversion through controlled burning appear in archaeological records across Africa and eventually throughout the world wherever modern humans established themselves. Each region developed variations suited to local conditions, but the basic principle remained the same: use fire to permanently transform forest ecosystems into more productive, managed landscapes. What makes this development so significant is that it represents the first time any species had deliberately and permanently altered Earth's ecosystems on such a massive scale. Previous environmental changes had been driven by climate, geology, or other natural forces. Early humans around Lake Malawi demonstrated that a relatively small population, armed with knowledge and fire, could reshape entire landscapes according to their needs. This achievement laid the foundation for all subsequent human environmental management, from agricultural development to modern conservation practices. Our ancestors had discovered the fundamental principle that would define human-environment relationships ever since: that nature could be actively managed and improved through deliberate intervention rather than simply accepted as given. Chapter 3. Masters of Stone and Flame. While fire gave early humans the power to reshape landscapes, it was their revolutionary stone tool technology that provided the precision instruments needed to exploit the transformed environments they had created. By 300,000 years ago, human toolmaking had evolved from simple rock bashing into sophisticated engineering that combined controlled fire with advanced stone working techniques. The breakthrough came at sites like Kesem Cave in Israel, where archaeologists have uncovered evidence of humans using fire not just for cooking and warmth, but as an integral part of their tool manufacturing process. They discovered that early humans were heating flint and other stone materials to specific temperatures before shaping them into tools. This wasn't random heating. It was precise thermal engineering that required deep understanding of how heat affects different types of stone. The process they developed was remarkably sophisticated. First, toolmakers would select appropriate raw materials, often traveling considerable distances to obtain the best quality stone. They would then build carefully controlled fires using specific types of fuel that burned at consistent temperatures. The stones were placed in these fires and heated to exact temperatures that varied depending on the intended tool type and the characteristics of the raw material. Heating stone before knapping had revolutionary effects on tool quality. The thermal treatment altered the internal structure of the stone, making it easier to shape and creating sharper, more durable cutting edges. Heated flint could be worked into thinner, more precise implements than unheated stone. The resulting tools were not only more effective, but also more economical to produce, as less raw material was wasted during the manufacturing process. Different tool types required different heating regimes. Blades intended for cutting and scraping were heated to relatively low temperatures around 259 degrees Celsius. This temperature was hot enough to improve workability without making the stone brittle. Flakes used for more robust tasks were heated to higher temperatures around 413 degrees. Specialized tools like pot lids, which may have been used for specific processing tasks, were heated to even higher temperatures, approaching 447 degrees. The precision required for this thermal treatment demonstrates remarkable advances in early human cognitive abilities. Toolmakers had to maintain consistent fire temperatures for extended periods, monitor the heating process carefully to prevent overheating or underheating, and judge when stones had reached the optimal temperature for working. This required sophisticated understanding of fire management, material properties, and timing. Archaeological evidence shows that these thermally treated tools were not luxury items reserved for special occasions. They were standard equipment in early human toolkits. Sites across Africa, Europe, and Asia show evidence of systematic fire treatment of stone tools, indicating that this technology spread rapidly throughout early human populations and became a defining characteristic of Middle Paleolithic technology. The advantages of improved tools extended far beyond simple cutting efficiency. Better tools enabled early humans to process a wider variety of foods, including tough plant materials that had previously been inedible. They could strip bark more efficiently for shelter construction, process animal hides more thoroughly for clothing, and work wood more precisely for spears and other implements. Sharp, durable tools also revolutionized hunting strategies. Early humans could fashion more effective spear points, create more precise cuts for butchering large game, and maintain their weapons more effectively in the field. The famous wooden spears found at Schkningen, Germany, dating to 400,000 years ago, were crafted with sophisticated stone tools that allowed precise shaping of the hardwood points. The combination of advanced tools and controlled fire created new possibilities for environmental manipulation. With sharp axes and fire, early humans could fell large trees that would have been impossible to remove by fire alone. They could create more precise clearings, remove specific plant species while preserving others, and shape landscapes with unprecedented accuracy. Toolmaking sites became centers of knowledge transmission and social organization. The complexity of thermal treatment required teaching and learning that went far beyond simple demonstration. Novice toolmakers had to understand the properties of different stone types, master fire management techniques, learn to judge temperatures and timing, and develop the motor skills needed for precise knapping. This educational process strengthened social bonds and created shared technical traditions that were passed down through generations. The standardization of tool types across vast geographic areas indicates that early humans had developed sophisticated systems for sharing technical knowledge. Similar heating temperatures and tool designs appear at sites thousands of kilometers apart, suggesting regular communication and cultural exchange between distant populations. This technological networking accelerated innovation and ensured that useful improvements spread rapidly throughout early human communities. Advanced stone tool technology also enabled the development of specialized implement types. Instead of relying on a few multi-purpose tools, early humans began creating specialized implements optimized for specific tasks. There were tools for cutting meat, others for processing plant materials, specialized scrapers for hide preparation, awls for piercing, and burins for engraving. This specialization increased efficiency and opened up new possibilities for material processing. The precision of thermally treated tools made possible the development of composite technologies, implements made from multiple materials combined together. Sharp stone points could be hafted to wooden shafts to create spears. Knives could be mounted in wooden handles for better leverage, and multiple stone flakes could be combined to create complex cutting implements. These composite tools were far more effective than simple stone implements alone. Archaeological evidence from sites like Terra Amata in France shows that by 400,000 years ago, early humans were using their advanced tool technology to construct sophisticated shelters. They could cut and shape wooden poles precisely, strip and prepare plant fibers for binding, and create tools specifically designed for construction tasks. The combination of fire and precision tools enabled the creation of more permanent, weather-resistant structures that could support larger social groups. The social implications of advanced tool technology were profound. Skilled toolmakers became valuable members of their communities, creating the first specialization of labor in human society. The time and resources invested in developing these skills meant that knowledge became a form of wealth that could be exchanged and inherited. This knowledge economy laid the foundation for the complex social stratification that would characterize later human societies. Quality tools also enabled early humans to venture into previously uninhabitable environments. With better weapons for hunting, more efficient processing tools for food preparation, and improved implements for shelter construction, they could establish sustainable communities in challenging environments like northern Europe during glacial periods or arid regions of Africa and Asia. The combination of fire mastery and advanced stone tool technology gave early humans an unprecedented advantage over both their environment and competing species. They could modify landscapes to suit their needs, create tools optimized for any task, and adapt quickly to changing conditions. This technological superiority helps explain how relatively small populations of early humans were able to expand across the globe and establish themselves in virtually every terrestrial environment on Earth. Chapter 4. The Great Hunt begins. Armed with fire and precision tools, early humans embarked on one of the most consequential hunting campaigns in Earth's history. Between 50,000 and 10,000 years ago, they systematically hunted the planet's largest animals to extinction, fundamentally reshaping ecosystems on every continent they encountered. This wasn't random predation. It was strategic, selective hunting that targeted the biggest, most energy-rich prey available. The scale of this extinction event was unprecedented in Earth's geological record. Of the 57 species of megaherbivores that existed 50,000 years ago, massive animals weighing over 1,000 kilograms, only 11 survive today. That represents an 81% extinction rate, far exceeding any previous natural extinction event. These weren't gradual disappearances spread over millions of years. In most regions, the megafauna vanished within a few thousand years of human arrival. The pattern was remarkably consistent across the globe. When humans first reached Australia around 50,000 years ago, that continent lost its giant marsupials, massive flightless birds, and enormous reptiles. North America's megafauna, including woolly mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats, disappeared shortly after humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge 13,000 years ago. South America experienced similar losses when humans arrived there, and even isolated islands saw their large animals vanish soon after human colonization. The hunting strategies early humans employed were devastatingly effective. They didn't need to kill every individual animal to drive a species extinct. Large mammals have naturally slow reproduction rates, long gestation periods, extended parental care, and late sexual maturity. Adding even modest hunting pressure to these slow-breeding populations was enough to push them into extinction spirals from which they couldn't recover. Early humans developed sophisticated group hunting techniques that could bring down animals many times their size. Archaeological sites like Laringen in Germany preserve 125,000-year-old wooden spears found embedded in the ribs of ancient elephants, proving that humans were taking on the largest land mammals with coordinated attacks. Similar evidence appears worldwide. Mammoth kill sites in Siberia, giant sloth remains with cut marks in South America, and butchered megafauna bones across Australia. The energy economics of megafauna hunting made perfect sense from the hunter's perspective. A single mammoth could provide as much meat as dozens of deer, with far less energy expenditure per calorie obtained. One successful mammoth hunt could feed a large group for weeks, providing not just meat, but also fat, hide for clothing and shelter, bones for tools, and ivory for implements. The return on investment was enormous compared to hunting smaller game. Early humans also discovered they could use environmental manipulation to make hunting easier. They would drive herds toward cliffs, creating natural kill sites where many animals could be dispatched quickly. In the Great Plains of North America, archaeological evidence shows that humans regularly drove bison herds over steep drops, killing far more animals than they could immediately process. Similar drive sites appear on every continent where large herbivores existed. Fire played a crucial role in hunting strategies. Early humans learned they could use controlled burns to funnel animals toward ambush sites, drive them into natural traps, or simply panic them into making poor decisions that made them vulnerable to attack. The combination of fire drives and coordinated group hunting was devastatingly effective against animals that had no evolutionary experience with such tactics. The technological arms race accelerated as humans encountered different types of prey. Hunting mammoth with spears required different techniques than hunting fast-moving horses or agile deer. Early humans developed increasingly sophisticated weapons, longer spears for safer attacks on dangerous prey, spear throwers for greater range and accuracy, and eventually bows and arrows for pursuing fast-moving game. But the megafauna hunting campaigns had consequences that extended far beyond the targeted species. Large herbivores were ecosystem engineers in their own right. Elephants maintained open grasslands by knocking down trees and shrubs. Giant ground sloths dispersed seeds across vast distances. Massive grazers like aurochs and ancient bison maintained prairie ecosystems through their feeding patterns. When these animals disappeared, entire landscapes began to change. The loss of megafauna created ecological cascades that rippled through every level of the food web. Grasslands that had been maintained by giant grazers began to revert to forest. Seed dispersal patterns changed dramatically when the largest seed-carrying animals vanished. Nutrient distribution across landscapes was disrupted when the animals that transported minerals and organic matter over long distances were eliminated. Some researchers estimate that the extinction of megafauna reduced global methane emissions by millions of tons per year. Large herbivores produce substantial amounts of methane through their digestive processes, and their disappearance may have contributed to climate changes at the end of the last ice age. The removal of megafauna essentially altered atmospheric chemistry on a global scale. Early humans also discovered that eliminating large predators made their own survival easier. Cave lions, giant bears, and massive wolves pose serious threats to human communities. By systematically hunting these apex predators, either directly or by removing their prey base, early humans created much safer environments for themselves and their families. The social implications of megafauna hunting were profound. Successful hunts required unprecedented levels of cooperation and coordination. Hunters had to work together to track animals across vast distances, coordinate complex attacks involving multiple groups, and share the enormous quantities of meat that resulted from successful kills. These collaborative efforts strengthened social bonds and created the foundation for larger, more complex human societies. Megafauna hunting also drove technological innovation at an accelerated pace. Each new type of prey required specialized tactics and tools. Hunters had to constantly adapt their techniques as they encountered different animals in new environments. This technological pressure helped fuel the rapid innovation that characterized the late Paleolithic period. The success of megafauna hunting created new challenges that would ultimately transform human society. As the largest animals became extinct or extremely rare, hunters were forced to adapt to pursuing smaller, faster, more elusive prey. This required different skills, more sophisticated weapons, and new hunting strategies. The need to capture multiple small animals instead of single large ones increased the total effort required to obtain adequate nutrition. Archaeological evidence from Israel shows that by 10,000 years ago, humans in some regions had hunted the available game animals to such low levels that they could no longer support purely hunting-based lifestyles. This hunting pressure may have been one of the driving forces behind the development of agriculture. When wild game became too scarce or difficult to catch, humans were forced to find alternative food sources. The legacy of the megafauna extinction campaigns continues to shape ecosystems today. Modern landscapes worldwide are fundamentally different from those that existed before human arrival. The open grasslands of Africa, the forests of North America, and the unique ecosystems of Australia all bear the permanent imprint of early human hunting activities. We live in a world that has been permanently diminished by the loss of its largest inhabitants, a world reshaped by our ancestors' remarkably effective hunting campaigns. Chapter 5. Engineering New Ecosystems. After eliminating the megafauna, early humans faced a challenge that would define the next phase of their relationship with nature: how to create productive ecosystems in landscapes that had been fundamentally altered by their own actions. The solution they developed was ecosystem engineering on a scale never before attempted by any species: the systematic reconstruction of natural environments to serve human needs. The transformation was most dramatic in regions like Northern Australia, where Aboriginal peoples developed what modern ecologists recognize as one of the most sophisticated landscape management systems ever created. Using controlled burning techniques refined over tens of thousands of years, they converted vast areas of dense forest into managed, mosaic landscapes that supported both human populations and diverse wildlife communities. The Aboriginal fire stick farming system operated on principles that seem almost impossibly complex. Different areas were burned on carefully planned rotational cycles, some every year, others every few years, and some only once per decade or longer. The timing of burns was precisely coordinated with seasonal patterns, plant growth cycles, and animal breeding seasons. The result was a landscape that looked natural, but was actually as carefully managed as any modern agricultural system. Early humans discovered that they could use fire to selectively encourage certain plant species while discouraging others. Plants that resprouted quickly after burning, like many grasses and shrubs that produced edible seeds or attracted game animals, thrived under regular burning regimes. Species that were killed by fire or required long periods to recover gradually disappeared from regularly burned areas. Over time, this selective pressure completely altered the species composition of vast regions. The technique wasn't limited to Australia. Archaeological evidence from sites across Africa, Europe, and the Americas shows that early humans were conducting similar ecosystem engineering projects wherever they established permanent populations. In each region, they adapted their techniques to local conditions, but the basic principle remained the same: use controlled disturbance to create more productive environments. In North America, Native American populations used fire to maintain vast grassland prairies that supported enormous bison herds. These grasslands required regular burning to prevent them from reverting to forest. Without human intervention, most of the Great Plains would have been woodland rather than the open grasslands that supported millions of bison. Archaeological evidence suggests that this prairie management system was maintained continuously for thousands of years. European forests were similarly modified by early human populations. Pollen studies from lake sediments show that many areas that appear to be natural forests today were actually maintained as open woodlands or forest grassland mosaics by systematic burning and selective tree removal. These managed landscapes supported much higher populations of game animals than dense, unmanaged forests. The engineering techniques extended beyond fire management to include sophisticated water control systems. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples constructed complex networks of fish traps, weirs, and artificial ponds that could capture and hold fish during seasonal migrations. Some of these structures covered areas of several square kilometers and represented engineering projects that required coordinated labor from multiple communities over extended periods. Similar water management systems appeared independently in many parts of the world. In Africa, early humans built elaborate fish weirs across seasonal rivers, creating permanent food sources in otherwise challenging environments. In North America, Native American communities constructed massive fish trap systems that could capture thousands of salmon during annual spawning runs. Early humans also discovered they could engineer forest composition by selective harvesting and protection of useful species. They would eliminate trees that provided little value while protecting and encouraging the growth of species that produce nuts, fruits, medicine, or materials for toolmaking. Over time, this selective management created forests that were far more productive for human use than natural, unmanaged woodlands. The scale of these ecosystem engineering projects was enormous. In some regions, early humans were managing landscapes covering thousands of square kilometers, according to systematic plans that required coordination between multiple communities over many generations. The knowledge required to maintain these systems had to be preserved and transmitted through oral traditions that could span centuries. Archaeological evidence suggests that these managed ecosystems were often more biodiverse than the natural systems they replaced. The mosaic patterns created by systematic burning and selective management provided a variety of habitat types within relatively small areas. This habitat diversity supported a wider range of plant and animal species than homogeneous natural environments. The engineering techniques also included sophisticated soil management practices. Early humans learned that controlled burning could improve soil fertility by releasing nutrients from decaying plant matter and reducing soil acidity. They developed techniques for maintaining soil quality through careful timing of disturbance cycles and selective encouragement of plants that enhanced soil chemistry. Some communities went even further, actively transplanting useful species to areas where they didn't naturally occur. Archaeological evidence from several continents shows that early humans were moving edible plants, medicinal species, and materials for toolmaking across substantial distances, essentially creating artificial ecosystems that combined useful species from different regions. The social organization required for these ecosystem engineering projects was remarkable. Successful landscape management required detailed knowledge that had to be shared between communities and transmitted across generations. Different groups had to coordinate their activities to prevent conflicts and ensure that management activities in one area didn't negatively impact neighboring regions. The development of these engineering skills also required sophisticated understanding of ecological relationships. Early humans had to understand how different species interacted with each other, how disturbance patterns affected plant and animal communities, and how their management activities would influence ecosystem processes over both short and long time scales. The success of ecosystem engineering gave early human communities unprecedented control over their food security. Instead of being dependent on whatever resources natural environments happened to provide, they could actively manage landscapes to increase the abundance of preferred species and reduce the prevalence of less useful ones. This predictable resource base enabled larger, more stable human populations. The engineering techniques also provided resilience against environmental changes. Managed landscapes could be adjusted relatively quickly in response to climate fluctuations, disease outbreaks, or other disturbances. If one area became less productive, management efforts could be shifted to other locations or modified to adapt to changing conditions. Modern ecological research has revealed that many ecosystems we consider natural today are actually the products of thousands of years of indigenous management. When European colonization disrupted these traditional management systems, many landscapes underwent dramatic changes that are still playing out today. Some areas that had been maintained as open grasslands for millennia reverted to dense forest. Others that had supported diverse wildlife communities became dominated by single species. The ecosystem engineering achievements of early humans represent one of the most remarkable technological developments in human history. Without metal tools, machinery, or fossil fuels, they transformed entire continents according to systematic plans that enhanced both human welfare and environmental productivity. These achievements laid the foundation for all subsequent human environmental management and demonstrated that with sufficient knowledge and coordination, humans can improve upon nature's designs. Chapter 6. The Invisible Infrastructure. Behind every successful ecosystem engineering project lay an invisible infrastructure that was perhaps even more revolutionary than the physical landscape. Modifications themselves, the complex knowledge systems, social networks, and cultural institutions that early humans developed to manage their transformed environments. This invisible infrastructure represented a cognitive revolution that was every bit as important as the discovery of fire or the development of tools. The knowledge required to manage landscapes on continental scales was staggering in its complexity. Early humans had to understand the life cycles of dozens of plant species, the behavioral patterns of numerous animal species, the interactions between different organisms, the effects of fire on various soil types, the influence of weather patterns on vegetation growth, and the long-term consequences of different management strategies. This knowledge was empirical, detailed, and accumulated over thousands of years of careful observation and experimentation. Unlike modern scientific knowledge that is recorded in books and databases, this traditional ecological knowledge existed only in human memory and was transmitted through oral traditions. Elder knowledge keepers held vast libraries of information in their minds, detailed maps of resource locations, calendars of optimal timing for various activities, catalogs of plant and animal, indicators that signaled environmental changes, and repositories of techniques for responding to different ecological conditions. The sophistication of these knowledge systems rivaled anything developed by modern ecology. Indigenous peoples developed classification systems that recognized subtle differences between closely related species, understood complex ecological relationships that modern science is only beginning to discover, and maintained detailed records of environmental changes over timescales that exceed the longest modern scientific studies. Archaeological evidence suggests that early human communities developed formal educational systems for transmitting this knowledge to younger generations. Children and adolescents underwent extended training periods during which they learned not just practical skills like fire making and tool construction, but also the complex ecological knowledge needed to read landscapes, predict environmental changes, and make sound management decisions. The social networks that supported ecosystem management were equally sophisticated. Successful landscape management required coordination between communities separated by hundreds of kilometers. Groups had to share information about resource conditions, coordinate timing of management activities, and resolve conflicts over access to managed areas. This coordination was accomplished through elaborate networks of kinship relationships, trade partnerships, and ceremonial gatherings that brought distant communities together on regular schedules. Marriage systems played a crucial role in maintaining these networks. By encouraging marriages between members of distant communities, Early humans created kinship links that facilitated information sharing and resource access across vast regions. These marriage networks ensured that useful innovations in management techniques would spread rapidly throughout connected communities, and that detailed knowledge about distant areas would be available when groups needed to relocate or expand their territories. Trade relationships provided another mechanism for maintaining landscape management networks. Communities specialized in managing different types of resources and traded surplus products with distant groups. This trade created economic incentives for maintaining productive landscapes and provided channels for sharing management knowledge. Archaeological evidence shows that some trade networks extended across entire continents, creating information highways that could rapidly disseminate new ecological knowledge. Ceremonial gatherings served as forums for coordinating management activities across large regions. These gatherings brought together knowledge keepers from many communities to share information about resource conditions, plan coordinated management activities, and resolve disputes over territorial boundaries. The ceremonies also provided opportunities for young people to learn from elders outside their own communities, ensuring that knowledge was preserved even if local populations experienced disasters or disruptions. The cultural institutions that supported ecosystem management were embedded in religious and spiritual systems that gave sacred significance to landscape care. Many indigenous societies developed belief systems that made environmental stewardship a religious obligation, ensuring that management knowledge would be preserved and practiced even during difficult periods. These spiritual frameworks also provided mechanisms for enforcing management rules and resolving conflicts over resource use. Storytelling traditions served as sophisticated information storage and transmission systems. Complex ecological knowledge was encoded in narratives that could be easily memorized and accurately transmitted across generations. These stories often contained multiple layers of meaning, entertaining surface narratives that appealed to children, and deeper ecological information that became apparent only after extensive training and experience. Seasonal ceremonies and rituals provided timing mechanisms for coordinating management activities across large regions. By linking management tasks to astronomical events, lunar cycles, or other natural phenomena, early humans created synchronized calendars that ensured activities like controlled burning or hunting would occur at optimal times throughout their territories. The legal frameworks that governed resource access and use were remarkably sophisticated. Early human communities developed detailed systems of property rights that defined who could access specific resources, when they could be harvested, and how they should be managed. These legal systems often included provisions for shared access during emergencies, collaborative management of large-scale projects, and inheritance of management responsibilities. Archaeological evidence suggests that some communities developed formal institutions for training landscape managers. Certain individuals specialized in ecosystem management and received extensive training in both practical techniques and the theoretical knowledge needed to adapt to changing conditions. These specialists served as consultants to multiple communities and played key roles in maintaining the knowledge systems that supported large-scale landscape management. The decision-making processes used for ecosystem management were highly participatory and designed to incorporate knowledge from multiple sources. Communities developed formal procedures for gathering information, evaluating management options, and reaching consensus on complex decisions that would affect large areas and many people. These processes ensured that decisions incorporated both practical experience and theoretical knowledge from various specialists. Quality control mechanisms ensured that management techniques remained effective over long periods. Communities developed systems for monitoring the results of management activities, identifying problems with existing techniques, and testing innovations. This adaptive management approach allowed them to continuously improve their practices and respond effectively to environmental changes. The invisible infrastructure also included sophisticated systems for territorial organization and resource allocation. Early human communities developed methods for dividing large landscapes into manageable units, assigning responsibility for different areas to specific groups, and coordinating activities between neighboring territories. These organizational systems prevented overexploitation of resources and ensured that all areas received appropriate management attention. Modern research has revealed that many aspects of this invisible infrastructure survived into historical periods and continue to influence contemporary indigenous societies. The knowledge systems, social networks, and cultural institutions developed by early humans proved remarkably durable and adaptable, persisting through major environmental and social changes over thousands of years. The collapse of these traditional management systems often had catastrophic consequences for both human populations and environmental conditions. When European colonization disrupted indigenous knowledge systems and social networks, many carefully managed landscapes rapidly degraded, leading to both environmental destruction and human suffering. Contemporary efforts to restore degraded ecosystems increasingly recognize the importance of traditional ecological knowledge and the social institutions that supported it. Modern conservation programs are beginning to incorporate indigenous management techniques and to rebuild the social networks needed to support large-scale ecosystem management. The invisible infrastructure created by early humans represents one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. It demonstrated that sustainable management of complex ecosystems was possible with appropriate knowledge systems, social organization, and cultural institutions. This achievement provides both inspiration and practical guidance for contemporary efforts to manage landscapes sustainably in an era of rapid environmental change. Chapter 7. The Art of Controlled Destruction. The mastery of controlled burning represented, perhaps, the most sophisticated technology developed by early humans, a precise art that required understanding fire behavior with almost scientific accuracy. Far from the random destruction that modern people often associate with wildfire, early human burning was a carefully choreographed dance between flame and landscape that could transform entire ecosystems with surgical precision. The complexity of controlled burning begins with understanding fire behavior itself. Early humans had to master the relationships between wind speed and direction, humidity levels, temperature, fuel moisture content, topography, and dozens of other variables that determine how fire will spread across a landscape. They developed an intuitive understanding of fire physics that rivaled anything taught in modern firefighting academies. Different types of fires produce different ecological effects, and early humans learned to create exactly the type of burn needed for specific purposes. Cool burns, conducted during humid conditions, would remove undergrowth while leaving larger trees intact, creating park-like environments that favored certain types of game animals. Hot burns during dry conditions could completely clear areas for new plant growth or eliminate unwanted vegetation. Ground fires could be used to prepare soil for seed germination, while crown fires could open dense canopies to create clearings. The timing of burns was crucial to their success. Early humans developed detailed calendars that coordinated burning activities with plant growth cycles, animal reproductive seasons, weather patterns, and other natural phenomena. Burns conducted at the wrong time could destroy desired vegetation, eliminate food sources for important animals, or fail to achieve intended landscape modifications. Aboriginal fire practitioners in Australia developed techniques so precise they could burn individual trees while leaving neighboring vegetation untouched. They learned to read subtle environmental cues, the color and texture of leaves, the direction of morning breezes, the behavior of insects, to predict exactly how fires would behave under specific conditions. This knowledge allowed them to create incredibly detailed landscape patterns with burns that covered only a few square meters. The tools used for controlled burning were deceptively simple but required great skill to use effectively. Fire sticks were carefully prepared from specific types of wood that burned at consistent rates and could be carried safely over long distances. Early humans developed techniques for maintaining smoldering fires in portable containers made from gourds, animal skulls, or specially prepared bark. They learned to create fire breaks using natural features like streams and rock outcrops, and to construct artificial barriers when natural ones weren't available. Archaeological evidence from sites across multiple continents shows that early humans developed standardized burning protocols that were remarkably consistent across vast geographic areas. Similar fire stick designs, burning techniques, and landscape patterns appear at sites thousands of kilometers apart, suggesting sophisticated systems for sharing knowledge and maintaining quality standards. The social organization required for large-scale controlled burning was extraordinary. Successful burns often required coordination between multiple communities, with different groups responsible for preparing fire breaks, monitoring weather conditions, igniting fires at precise times, and suppressing flames that threatened to spread beyond intended boundaries. These collaborative efforts required levels of planning and coordination that exceeded anything required for other early human activities. Communication systems were crucial for coordinating burning activities. Early humans developed sophisticated signaling methods using smoke, drumbeats, horn calls, and other techniques to coordinate activities across distances of many kilometers. Archaeological evidence suggests that some communities built permanent signal stations on hilltops to facilitate communication during burning operations. Safety protocols were essential for preventing accidental fires that could destroy valuable resources or threaten human settlements. Early humans developed detailed procedures for conducting burns safely, including requirements for specific weather conditions, mandatory fire breaks around settlements, and emergency response plans for fires that escaped control. Archaeological evidence suggests that serious burning accidents were rare, indicating high levels of skill and careful adherence to safety protocols. The ecological knowledge required for effective controlled burning was encyclopedic in scope. Practitioners had to understand how hundreds of different plant species responded to fire, how various soil types affected fire spread and intensity, how topographic features influenced fire behavior, and how different animal species reacted to burning. This knowledge was accumulated over thousands of years and transmitted through apprenticeship, systems that could take decades to complete. Early humans discovered that controlled burning could be used to create incredibly complex landscape patterns that maximize productivity for human use. They developed techniques for creating mosaic burns that provided diverse habitats within small areas, gradient burns that created transitional zones between different ecosystem types, and rotational burning systems that maintained optimal conditions across large regions over extended time periods. The precision achievable through controlled burning was remarkable. Aboriginal practitioners could create grassland patches of specific sizes surrounded by forest, maintain narrow corridors of particular vegetation types for wildlife movement, and establish complex patterns of burned and unburned areas that provided resources throughout the year. Some of these managed landscapes were so intricate that they resembled elaborate gardens more than natural ecosystems. Modern fire ecology research has revealed that many ecosystems we consider natural today were actually maintained by controlled burning for thousands of years. When these traditional burning practices were disrupted by European colonization, many landscapes underwent dramatic changes. Grasslands reverted to forest, open woodlands became dense thickets, and diverse ecosystems became dominated by single species that thrived without regular burning. The techniques developed by early humans for controlled burning were so effective that modern land managers are increasingly adopting similar approaches. Contemporary prescribed burning programs often use traditional indigenous knowledge to design burns that achieve specific ecological objectives while minimizing risks to human settlements and infrastructure. Climate manipulation through controlled burning represents one of the most sophisticated applications of this technology. Early humans discovered that systematic burning across large areas could influence local weather patterns by changing vegetation cover, soil moisture, and surface temperatures. Some researchers suggest that traditional burning practices may have had significant effects on regional and even global climate patterns. The psychological aspects of controlled burning were equally important. Mastering fire gave early humans a sense of control over natural forces that had previously seemed unpredictable and dangerous. This psychological empowerment may have been crucial for developing the confidence needed to undertake large-scale landscape modification projects and to expand into challenging new environments. Quality control systems ensured that burning techniques remained effective over long periods. Early human communities developed methods for evaluating the success of burns, identifying problems with techniques, and refining practices based on results. This adaptive approach allowed them to continuously improve their methods and maintain high standards of performance across many generations. The legacy of controlled burning mastery extends far beyond its immediate ecological effects. The organizational skills, technical knowledge, and social cooperation required for large-scale burning programs provided foundations for many later human achievements. The same types of planning, coordination, and knowledge management that made controlled burning possible were later applied to agriculture, construction projects, and other complex undertakings that characterize advanced human societies. Chapter 8. Shaping the food web. The most profound consequence of early human forest control was their systematic reshaping of entire food webs. The complex networks of predator-prey relationships that determine which species thrive and which disappear from ecosystems. Through strategic elimination of competitors and targeted management of prey species, early humans became the apex predators in every environment they encountered, fundamentally altering the rules that had governed natural ecosystems for millions of years. The transformation began with the elimination of competing predators. Large carnivores like cave lions, giant bears, and massive wolves posed direct threats to human communities and competed for the same prey animals that humans preferred to hunt. Archaeological evidence from sites across Europe shows that early humans systematically targeted these apex predators, using coordinated group attacks to eliminate animals that individual hunters could never hope to defeat alone. The techniques used for predator elimination were sophisticated and varied according to the target species. Cave bear populations were eliminated by systematically occupying and defending cave systems during winter hibernation periods, when the bears were vulnerable and unable to escape. Large cats were hunted using coordinated drives that forced them into locations where groups of spear-armed hunters could attack them safely. Pack-hunting predators like direwolves were eliminated by targeting their den sites and killing pups before they could mature. The ecological consequences of predator elimination rippled through entire ecosystems. Without large carnivores controlling their populations, herbivore species experienced dramatic population explosions that fundamentally altered vegetation patterns. Archaeological sites from the late Pleistocene show clear evidence of these population booms. Massive bone deposits from single species that indicate unprecedented abundance of animals like horses, bison, and deer. Early humans then discovered they could manipulate these exploding herbivore populations to their advantage. Instead of allowing animals to distribute randomly across landscapes, They used controlled burning and selective habitat management to concentrate preferred species in specific areas where they could be hunted efficiently. This represented a fundamental shift from opportunistic hunting to strategic game management. The creation of artificial grazing ecosystems was one of the most sophisticated applications of food web manipulation. Early humans learned that they could use controlled burning to create and maintain grassland areas that attracted and concentrated grazing animals. These managed grasslands could support far higher densities of game animals than natural ecosystems, essentially creating outdoor livestock operations without domestication. Archaeological evidence from North America shows that Native American populations maintained vast managed bison ranges across the Great Plains for thousands of years. These grasslands required regular burning to prevent them from reverting to forest, and the bison populations that grazed them were carefully managed through selective hunting that maintained optimal herd sizes and age structures. Similar game management systems appeared independently on other continents. In Africa, early human populations used controlled burning to maintain savanna grasslands that supported large herds of antelope, zebra, and other grazing animals. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples created managed landscapes that concentrated kangaroo populations in areas where they could be hunted efficiently using traditional techniques. The manipulation of food webs extended beyond large mammals to include management of bird populations, fish communities, and even insect populations. Early humans discovered that they could use controlled burning to create habitat conditions that favored certain bird species while discouraging others. Archaeological sites in Europe show evidence of systematic management of migratory waterfowl populations through habitat manipulation around lakes and wetlands. Fish population management was equally sophisticated. Early humans constructed elaborate weir systems that could selectively harvest certain fish species while allowing others to pass through unharmed. These systems required detailed knowledge of fish behavior, migration patterns, and reproductive cycles. Some archaeological sites show evidence of fish management systems that operated continuously for thousands of years. The social organization required for food web management was extraordinary. Successful manipulation of animal populations required coordination between multiple communities across vast areas. Different groups had to coordinate their hunting activities to prevent overexploitation of shared resources, maintain habitat management activities that benefited all participants, and resolve conflicts over access to productive areas. Trade networks played crucial roles in food web management by allowing communities to specialize in managing different types of resources. Some groups focused on maintaining grasslands for large grazers. Others specialized in forest management for woodland species, and still others concentrated on wetland management for waterfowl and fish. This specialization increased overall productivity, while reducing conflicts over resource access. The knowledge systems required for food web management were incredibly complex. Practitioners had to understand the feeding relationships between dozens of species, the effects of environmental changes on animal populations, the timing of reproductive cycles for multiple species, and the long-term consequences of different management strategies. This knowledge was accumulated over thousands of years and transmitted through sophisticated educational systems. Early humans also discovered that they could introduce species to new areas where they didn't naturally occur, essentially creating artificial ecosystems that combined useful species from different regions. Archaeological evidence shows that humans were transporting animals across substantial distances and establishing breeding populations in new environments thousands of years before the development of formal domestication. The manipulation of plant communities was equally important for food web management. Early humans learned that they could encourage the growth of plants that attracted preferred animal species while discouraging vegetation that favored less useful animals. This botanical management required understanding the feeding preferences of numerous animal species and the ecological requirements of their preferred food plants. Seasonal management strategies allowed early humans to maintain productive food webs throughout the year. They developed techniques for providing animal populations with adequate food and shelter during different seasons, ensuring that preferred species remained abundant and accessible year-round. This seasonal planning required sophisticated understanding of animal behavior and environmental cycles. The development of storage technologies allowed early humans to take advantage of seasonal abundance while maintaining food security during lean periods. Archaeological evidence shows that some communities developed elaborate systems for preserving meat, fish, and plant foods that allowed them to support larger populations than would have been possible with immediate consumption strategies alone. Modern ecological research has revealed that many wildlife populations we consider natural today are actually the products of thousands of years of indigenous management. When traditional management systems were disrupted by European colonization, many animal populations experienced dramatic changes. Some species that had been maintained at high densities through habitat management crashed to near extinction levels, while others that had been controlled expanded rapidly and became ecological pests. The food web management achievements of early humans demonstrated that sustainable manipulation of complex ecological systems was possible with appropriate knowledge and social organization. These achievements provide valuable insights for contemporary wildlife management efforts and suggest that more sophisticated approaches to ecosystem management might be possible than are currently being attempted. The legacy of early human food web manipulation continues to influence ecosystems worldwide. Modern landscapes, wildlife populations, and ecological relationships all bear the imprint of thousands of years of indigenous management. Understanding this legacy is crucial for developing effective conservation strategies and for restoring degraded ecosystems to productive conditions. Chapter 9. When giants walked among us, the world that early humans inherited was a place of giants, creatures so massive and magnificent that they dwarf anything alive today. Imagine walking through forests where ground sloths the size of small elephants browsed in the canopy, where saber-toothed cats with fangs longer than kitchen knives stalked through the undergrowth, and where armadillos as large as small cars trundled across ancient landscapes. This was the world of Pleistocene megafauna, and early humans didn't just witness it. They systematically dismantled it. The scale of these ancient giants is almost incomprehensible to modern minds. The Irish elk stood over 6 feet tall at the shoulder and carried antlers that spanned 12 feet from tip to tip. Cave bears weighed up to 1,500 pounds and stood 8 feet tall on their hind legs. Woolly mammoths towered over modern elephants, with some individuals reaching heights of 14 feet and weights exceeding 12 tons. These weren't just large animals. They were living monuments to evolution's capacity for creating massive life forms. North America was particularly rich in megafauna diversity. The continent supported giant beavers, the size of black bears that built dams across major rivers. Short-faced bears stood 12 feet tall and could run faster than modern horses. American cheetahs pursued pronghorn antelope across vast grasslands, while dire wolves hunted in packs that could bring down the largest prey. The diversity was staggering. Over 130 species of mammals, weighing more than 100 pounds, roamed the continent. South America hosted equally impressive giants. Ground sloths reached the size of modern rhinoceros and used their massive claws to strip vegetation from trees that modern animals couldn't reach. Glyptodonts, armadillos the size of Volkswagen Beetles, carried club-like tails that could crush the skulls of attacking predators. Tara birds standing 10 feet tall stalked across ancient pampas on legs, powerful enough to kick through the ribcage of any animal that challenged them. Australia's megafauna was perhaps the most bizarre of all. Diprotodon, a marsupial the size of a hippopotamus, browsed on vegetation across the continent's interior. Monitor lizards over 20 feet long patrolled ancient forests, while flightless birds weighing 1,000 pounds dominated open landscapes. These creatures had evolved in isolation for millions of years, creating ecosystems unlike anything that existed elsewhere on Earth. The ecological roles played by these giants were fundamental to ecosystem functioning. Large herbivores maintained open landscapes by trampling vegetation and preventing forests from becoming too dense. Their feeding activities created natural clearings that supported diverse plant communities and provided habitat for smaller animals. Massive grazers like ancient bison and wild horses maintained vast grassland systems through their feeding patterns. Megafauna also served as ecosystem engineers through their movement patterns. Elephants and mastodons created networks of trails that other animals used for migration routes. Their wallowing activities created seasonal ponds that supported aquatic life during dry periods. Even their dung piles became micro-ecosystems that supported specialized plant and insect communities. The seed dispersal services provided by megafauna were irreplaceable. Large herbivores could carry seeds hundreds of kilometers from their parent plants, enabling genetic exchange between distant plant populations and facilitating species expansion into new habitats. Some plants evolved specifically to take advantage of megafauna dispersal, producing large, nutritious fruits that could only be effectively dispersed by the largest animals. When early humans encountered these giants, the meeting represented a collision between two evolutionary strategies that had developed in isolation. Megafauna had evolved over millions of years in environments without human predators. They had no innate fear of upright, tool-using primates, and no behavioral adaptations for dealing with coordinated group attacks. Their size, which had been their greatest protection against other predators, made them conspicuous targets for human hunters. The hunting strategies developed by early humans were devastatingly effective against naive megafauna. Coordinated group attacks could bring down animals many times the size of individual hunters. Drive hunting techniques forced entire herds over cliffs or into natural traps where they could be killed efficiently. The development of long-range weapons like spears and later bows allowed humans to attack dangerous prey from relatively safe distances. Archaeological evidence of megafauna hunting appears at sites worldwide. Clovis points embedded in mammoth bones in North America, cut marks on giant sloth remains in South America, and butchered megafauna bones in Australia all testify to early human success at hunting the largest available prey. Some kill sites show evidence of mass slaughter events where dozens of animals were killed simultaneously. The energy economics of megafauna hunting made perfect sense from the hunter's perspective. A single mammoth provided as much meat as hundreds of rabbits, with far less energy expenditure per calorie obtained. The fat reserves of large animals were particularly valuable, providing essential nutrients that were difficult to obtain from other sources. Successful megafauna hunts could feed large groups for extended periods. The extinction process wasn't immediate, but it was inexorable. Each successful hunting season reduced breeding populations. The slow reproductive rates of large mammals meant they couldn't replace losses quickly enough to maintain stable populations under hunting pressure. Species that had survived millions of years of climate change and natural disasters succumbed to human pressure within a few thousand years. The psychological impact of living among giants may have been equally important for early human development. Sharing landscapes with massive, potentially dangerous animals required constant vigilance and sophisticated risk assessment abilities. The challenge of hunting creatures many times their own size may have driven innovations in cooperation, planning, and technological development that wouldn't have occurred in environments dominated by smaller prey. The process of megafauna extinction also created new challenges that drove human innovation. As the largest animals became rare or extinct, hunters were forced to adapt to pursuing smaller, faster, more elusive prey. This required different skills, more sophisticated weapons, and new hunting strategies. The technological arms race accelerated as humans had to become increasingly clever to maintain adequate nutrition. Modern research suggests that the extinction of megafauna had consequences that extended far beyond the loss of individual species. Computer models indicate that megafauna extinction may have altered global climate patterns by changing vegetation cover and reducing methane emissions from large herbivores. The loss of seed dispersers fundamentally altered plant distribution patterns that are still evident today. Some researchers argue that the extinction of megafauna represents one of the most significant ecological catastrophes in Earth's history. The loss of these giants eliminated ecosystem functions that had operated for millions of years and left ecological niches that have never been refilled. Modern ecosystems worldwide are fundamentally impoverished compared to the megafauna-rich environments that early humans inherited. The megafauna extinction also marked a turning point in human-environment relationships. For the first time, human activities had driven large-scale extinction of our species. This established a pattern of resource exploitation and environmental transformation that has characterized human societies ever since. The success of megafauna hunting may have given early humans the confidence and technological capabilities needed to undertake even larger environmental modification projects. Contemporary efforts to restore degraded ecosystems increasingly recognize the importance of large herbivores for maintaining ecosystem health. Projects to reintroduce elephants, bison, and other large grazers to degraded landscapes often produce dramatic improvements in biodiversity and ecosystem functioning. These restoration efforts provide glimpses of what pre-human ecosystems might have looked like when giants walked among us. Chapter 10. The birth of landscape architecture by 10,000 years ago. Early humans had become the world's first landscape architects, creating design environments that combined aesthetic beauty with functional efficiency on a scale that wouldn't be matched again until the modern era. These weren't accidental modifications or temporary adaptations. They were permanent transformations that reflected sophisticated understanding of ecological principles and careful planning for long-term sustainability. The scope of early human landscape architecture was breathtaking. Entire river valleys were redesigned to optimize water flow and create productive wetlands. Vast grassland systems were established and maintained across continents to support managed wildlife populations. Forest compositions were altered to maximize production of useful species while eliminating undesirable vegetation. The result was landscapes that looked natural but were actually as carefully designed as any modern city. Archaeological evidence from the Gunditjmara people of Southeast Australia reveals one of the most sophisticated landscape architecture projects ever attempted by pre-agricultural societies. Over thousands of years, they constructed elaborate networks of stone channels, weirs, and artificial ponds that transformed natural wetlands into highly productive aquaculture systems. These installations covered areas of hundreds of square kilometers and required coordination between multiple communities over many generations. The engineering required for these projects was remarkable. The Gunditjmara systems included precisely engineered stone weirs that could regulate water flow during different seasons, artificial channels that directed fish into harvest areas, and complex networks of ponds that provided breeding habitat for preferred species. The stonework was so sophisticated that some structures have remained functional for thousands of years with minimal maintenance. Similar landscape architecture projects appeared independently around the world. In North America, Native American communities created vast managed prairie systems that required constant maintenance through controlled burning. These grasslands weren't natural features. They were artificial ecosystems that would have reverted to forest without human intervention. The scale was enormous, with managed grasslands covering millions of square kilometers across the Great Plains. European forests were similarly transformed through systematic landscape architecture. Archaeological evidence shows that many areas that appear to be natural woodland today were actually carefully designed forest gardens that maximize production of nuts, fruits, medicinal plants, and materials for toolmaking. These managed forests required selective harvesting, controlled burning, and careful species management to maintain their productivity. The aesthetic principles that guided early landscape architecture were sophisticated and varied between cultures. Many designs emphasized creating diverse habitat mosaics that provided visual interest while maximizing ecological productivity. Others focused on establishing clear sightlines for hunting or defense while maintaining natural-looking vegetation. Patterns. Some cultures developed geometric patterns that reflected their spiritual beliefs while serving practical functions. Water management was a central component of most landscape architecture projects. Early humans learned to redirect streams, create artificial wetlands, and establish pond systems that supported both wildlife and human communities. Archaeological sites across multiple continents show evidence of sophisticated hydraulic engineering that rival modern water management systems in their complexity and effectiveness. The planning processes required for large-scale landscape architecture were extraordinary. These projects required coordination between multiple communities, careful scheduling of work activities across seasons and years, and long-term vision that could span many generations. The social organization needed to plan and execute these projects represented a major advance in human cooperative abilities. Knowledge management systems were crucial for maintaining landscape architecture projects over extended periods. The technical knowledge required to design and maintain these systems had to be preserved and transmitted across generations through oral traditions. This knowledge included understanding of hydrology, ecology, geology, and engineering that was remarkably sophisticated for societies without written language. Quality control mechanisms ensured that landscape architecture projects achieved their intended purposes and remained functional over long periods. Early human communities developed systems for monitoring the performance of their installations, identifying problems before they became serious, and making adjustments to improve effectiveness. This adaptive management approach allowed them to continuously refine their designs. The integration of multiple functions was a hallmark of early landscape architecture. Single installations often served multiple purposes, providing food production, flood control, wildlife habitat, transportation routes, and defensive positions simultaneously. This multifunctional approach maximized the return on investment while minimizing environmental disruption. Maintenance systems were essential for preserving landscape architecture projects over centuries or millennia. Early human communities developed detailed protocols for ongoing care of their installations, including seasonal cleaning activities, periodic reconstruction of damaged components, and systematic replacement of aging infrastructure. Some sites show evidence of continuous maintenance over thousands of years. The materials used in landscape architecture projects were carefully selected for durability and functionality. Stone installations were built using techniques that allowed them to withstand floods, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. Wooden components were crafted from species known for their resistance to decay and insect damage. Even earthwork projects use soil compositions optimized for stability and longevity. Archaeological evidence suggests that some communities developed specialized professions focused on landscape architecture. Certain individuals became experts in designing and constructing large-scale installations and traveled between communities to share their knowledge and oversee major projects. This specialization allowed for more sophisticated designs and higher construction standards. The economic benefits of landscape architecture were substantial. Well-designed installations could dramatically increase the productivity of natural resources while reducing the labor required to harvest them. Fish weirs could capture thousands of fish during seasonal migrations with minimal human effort. Managed forests could produce consistent yields of nuts and fruits without depleting natural stocks. Climate adaptation was an important consideration in landscape architecture design. Installations were designed to function effectively under varying weather conditions and to provide resilience against droughts, floods, and other environmental extremes. This forward-thinking approach allowed human communities to maintain stable resource bases despite environmental fluctuations. Modern landscape architects are increasingly recognizing the sophistication of early human design principles and incorporating traditional techniques into contemporary projects. Indigenous knowledge about sustainable design, multifunctional installations, and ecosystem integration is being applied to modern challenges like urban planning, ecological restoration, and climate adaptation. The scale of early human landscape architecture projects demonstrates that sophisticated environmental design was possible long before the development of modern technology. These achievements challenge assumptions about the capabilities of pre-industrial societies and provide inspiration for contemporary efforts to create sustainable human environments. Contemporary archaeological research continues to reveal new examples of early landscape architecture around the world. As investigation techniques improve and more sites are studied, it becomes increasingly clear that large-scale environmental design was a common feature of early human societies across all continents. The legacy of early landscape architecture continues to influence modern environments. Many landscapes we consider natural today are actually the products of thousands of years of human design and management. Understanding this legacy is crucial for developing effective approaches to contemporary environmental challenges and for creating sustainable human settlements in an era of rapid environmental change. The principles developed by early landscape architects, integration of multiple functions, adaptation to local conditions, long-term sustainability, and aesthetic beauty, remain relevant for modern design challenges. Their achievements demonstrate that humans can create designed environments that enhance rather than degrade natural systems, providing a model for sustainable development in the contemporary world. Chapter 11. Legacy of the Forest Masters. The transformation is complete. As we reach the end of our journey through deep time, we find ourselves standing in a world that has been utterly reshaped by early human ingenuity. The vast, untamed forests that once covered continents have been replaced by carefully managed landscapes that blend human needs with ecological function. But the true legacy of these forest masters extends far beyond the physical changes they made. It lies in the revolutionary relationship they established between humanity and nature. Today's world bears the permanent imprint of early human forest control in ways both obvious and subtle. The grasslands of North America, the open woodlands of Australia, the savanna landscapes of Africa, all these environments that we consider natural are actually human artifacts maintained by indigenous peoples for thousands of years through controlled burning and selective management. When we walk through these landscapes, we're experiencing ecosystems that were designed and maintained by skilled practitioners who understood ecological relationships with scientific precision. The depth of this transformation becomes apparent when we examine specific landscapes in detail. Yellowstone National Park, often considered the epitome of pristine wilderness, was actually managed by Native American populations for thousands of years through systematic burning programs. The iconic meadows where bison graze were maintained as grasslands through regular fires that prevented forest encroachment. Without this human management, many of these areas would have been dense forest rather than the open landscapes that visitors expect to see. Similar revelations emerge from landscapes worldwide. The heathlands of Scotland, the oak savannas of California, the eucalyptus woodlands of Australia, all were shaped by indigenous burning practices that created and maintained these distinctive ecosystems. European colonists often described these landscapes as park-like because they resembled the managed estates of European nobility, not realizing they were seeing the results of sophisticated indigenous land management. Modern conservation efforts increasingly recognize the sophisticated nature of traditional forest management and are incorporating indigenous techniques into contemporary practice. Fire management agencies now employ traditional burning practices that were developed thousands of years ago. Restoration ecologists use indigenous knowledge about plant-animal relationships to rebuild degraded ecosystems. The principles of ecosystem management that early humans pioneered are being rediscovered and applied to modern environmental challenges. The integration of traditional knowledge with modern conservation has produced remarkable results. In Australia, Aboriginal fire management techniques are being used to reduce catastrophic wildfire risks while restoring native ecosystems. These programs have demonstrated that traditional burning practices can reduce fire intensity by 40 to 60%, while increasing native plant diversity and improving wildlife habitat quality. Similar programs in North America are using Native American burning techniques to restore prairie ecosystems and reduce fire risks in wildland-urban interface areas. These projects have shown that cultural burning practices can achieve conservation objectives more effectively and at lower cost than conventional management approaches. The success of these programs is leading to increased recognition of indigenous knowledge as sophisticated science rather than folklore. The genetic legacy of early human forest management is still unfolding in contemporary ecosystems. Many plant and animal species bear the evolutionary imprint of thousands of years of human selection pressure. Plants that were favored by indigenous managers became more common and developed characteristics that made them more useful to humans. Animals that adapted well to human-modified environments thrived, while those that couldn't adapt disappeared. Genetic analysis is revealing the extent of this evolutionary influence. Many plant species that appear wild actually show signs of human selection for larger seeds, more nutritious fruits, or other characteristics that made them more valuable to indigenous peoples. Some animals, particularly those that thrived in human-managed landscapes, show genetic adaptations that allowed them to exploit resources created by human activities. The coevolutionary relationships between humans and other species were complex and sophisticated. Indigenous peoples didn't just select for immediate usefulness. They managed species interactions to create sustainable systems that could persist over many generations. They understood that maintaining predator-prey relationships was essential for ecosystem stability, that pollinator populations were crucial for plant reproduction, and that seed dispersal networks needed to be maintained to ensure forest regeneration. Archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of early human forest mastery, challenging our understanding of what pre-industrial societies could accomplish. Recent discoveries show that the scale and sophistication of ancient environmental management exceeded anything previously imagined. Entire regions that appeared to be pristine wilderness to European explorers were actually highly managed landscapes that had been carefully maintained for millennia. Advanced archaeological techniques are revolutionizing our understanding of indigenous landscape management. LiDAR technology is revealing massive earthwork systems hidden beneath forest canopies in the Amazon, showing that indigenous peoples transform millions of hectares of rainforest into managed agricultural landscapes. Soil analysis is detecting evidence of ancient burning practices in areas where no surface evidence remains visible. Paleogenetic techniques are providing new insights into how indigenous management influenced species distributions and genetic diversity. These studies show that human management often increased rather than decreased biodiversity by creating habitat mosaics that supported more species than uniform natural ecosystems. This challenges assumptions about human impact being inevitably harmful to natural systems. The social innovations developed for forest management laid foundations for many aspects of modern human society. The knowledge systems, cooperative institutions, and planning processes that early humans created to manage landscapes became templates for organizing complex societies. The same principles of coordination, knowledge sharing, and long-term planning that made large-scale ecosystem management possible were later applied to agriculture, urban planning, and industrial development. The governance systems developed for landscape management were particularly sophisticated. Indigenous societies created complex institutions for managing shared resources, resolving conflicts over resource access, and coordinating activities across large regions. These systems included formal decision-making processes, dispute resolution mechanisms, and enforcement procedures that ensured sustainable resource use. Property rights systems developed for landscape management were equally sophisticated. Indigenous peoples created complex systems of territorial organization that defined access rights to different resources at different times of the year. These systems often included provisions for shared access during emergencies, collaborative management of large-scale projects, and inheritance of management responsibilities. Climate science is revealing that early human forest management may have influenced global atmospheric conditions. The controlled burning practices used by indigenous peoples worldwide release carbon dioxide and reduced methane emissions on scales that may have affected global climate patterns. Some researchers suggest that traditional burning practices helped stabilize climate conditions during the Holocene period, contributing to the environmental stability that enabled the development of agriculture and civilization. The atmospheric impacts of indigenous burning were complex and varied by region. In some areas, regular burning reduced fuel loads and prevented massive wildfires that would have released large amounts of carbon. In others, burning converted forests to grasslands that stored less carbon but supported different types of wildlife. The net effects on global climate are still being debated, but it's clear that indigenous burning influenced atmospheric chemistry on regional and possibly global scales. Recent studies suggest that the cessation of indigenous burning practices following European colonization may have contributed to climate changes during the Little Ice Age, when indigenous populations were decimated by disease and warfare. Their burning practices stopped, leading to forest regrowth that may have removed significant amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This demonstrates the global significance of indigenous landscape management practices. The psychological relationship between humans and nature was fundamentally altered by the achievements of early forest masters. For the first time in evolutionary history, humans saw themselves not as subjects of natural forces, but as active managers of environmental conditions. This shift in perspective enabled the confidence and ambition needed for subsequent achievements like agriculture, urbanization, and technological development. This psychological transformation had profound implications for human development. The confidence gained from successfully controlling natural forces encouraged humans to attempt increasingly ambitious projects. The knowledge that environments could be improved through human intervention provided motivation for long-term planning and investment. The understanding that cooperation could achieve results beyond individual capabilities fostered the development of complex social institutions. The spiritual and cultural dimensions of landscape management were equally important. Many indigenous societies developed belief systems that emphasized human responsibility for caring for natural systems. These spiritual frameworks provided motivation for long-term environmental stewardship and created cultural institutions that ensured management knowledge would be preserved and practiced across generations. Modern technology is enabling new appreciation for the sophistication of traditional forest management. Satellite imagery reveals landscape patterns created by indigenous burning that are invisible from ground level. Archaeological techniques can now detect evidence of ancient environmental management that was previously unrecognizable. Genetic analysis shows how human selection pressure influenced the evolution of plant and animal species over thousands of years. Remote sensing technology is revolutionizing our understanding of indigenous landscape management. Satellite analysis can detect the signatures of ancient burning practices in vegetation patterns, soil chemistry, and species distributions. These techniques are revealing that indigenous management influenced landscapes across much larger areas than previously recognized. Computer modeling is helping scientists understand how indigenous management practices affected ecosystem processes. These models show that traditional burning practices often created more stable and resilient ecosystems than unmanaged natural systems. They also demonstrate that indigenous management techniques could be effective tools for addressing contemporary environmental challenges. The disruption of traditional forest management systems by European colonization created environmental consequences that are still playing out today. Many landscapes that had been maintained in productive, biodiverse conditions for millennia underwent rapid degradation when traditional management ceased. The loss of indigenous knowledge about sustainable ecosystem management contributed to many contemporary environmental problems. The ecological consequences of management disruption were often catastrophic. Grasslands that had been maintained for thousands of years through regular burning quickly reverted to forest or were invaded by non-native species. Fire-adapted ecosystems became overgrown with flammable vegetation that created conditions for catastrophic wildfires. Wildlife populations that had been sustained by habitat management crashed when their managed environments disappeared. The social consequences were equally severe. Indigenous communities lost not just their land but their entire knowledge systems for managing it. Generations of accumulated environmental knowledge disappeared within decades as traditional practices were prohibited and young people were prevented from learning from elders. This knowledge loss represents one of the greatest intellectual catastrophes in human history. Contemporary indigenous communities are working to revive traditional forest management practices and apply them to modern conservation challenges. These efforts demonstrate that ancient techniques remain relevant and effective for addressing current environmental problems. The integration of traditional knowledge with modern science is producing innovative approaches to ecosystem management that neither system could achieve alone. Cultural revitalization programs are working to restore traditional ecological knowledge and management practices. Elders who still remember traditional techniques are working with younger generations to re-establish burning practices, restore native plant populations, and rebuild wildlife habitat. These programs are demonstrating that traditional knowledge can be successfully transmitted and adapted to contemporary conditions. Collaborative management programs are bringing together indigenous communities, government agencies, and scientific institutions to develop integrated approaches to ecosystem management. These partnerships are producing management strategies that combine traditional knowledge with modern scientific understanding, resulting in more effective conservation outcomes than either approach could achieve independently. Education systems around the world are beginning to incorporate knowledge about early human environmental management into their curricula. Students are learning that indigenous peoples were sophisticated scientists and engineers who developed sustainable technologies for managing complex ecosystems. This knowledge is changing perceptions about both human capabilities and environmental relationships. Educational programs are helping students understand that indigenous knowledge represents sophisticated science that developed through thousands of years of careful observation and experimentation. Students learn that traditional ecological knowledge is not primitive folklore, but rather sophisticated understanding of ecological relationships that often exceeds modern scientific knowledge in depth and detail. University programs are beginning to integrate traditional ecological knowledge with conventional environmental science. These programs are training a new generation of environmental managers who understand both traditional and modern approaches to ecosystem management. This integration is producing more effective and culturally appropriate approaches to environmental challenges that the economic principles underlying traditional forest management provide insights for developing sustainable economic systems. Indigenous societies demonstrated that human communities could prosper while maintaining and enhancing environmental productivity over thousands of years. Their approaches to resource management, risk distribution, and long-term planning offer alternatives to short-term exploitation models that have dominated recent human history. Traditional economic systems emphasize sustainability and resilience over maximum short-term production. Indigenous communities developed sophisticated systems for managing resources to ensure long-term availability rather than maximizing immediate extraction. These systems included seasonal restrictions on harvesting, rotational use of different areas, and careful monitoring of resource conditions. Risk management in traditional systems was sophisticated and comprehensive. Indigenous communities developed diverse resource portfolios that reduced dependence on any single resource. They created storage systems that provided security during lean periods. They maintained trade networks that provided access to resources from distant areas when local conditions were unfavorable. Urban planning is increasingly incorporating principles derived from traditional landscape management. The creation of diverse habitat mosaics, integration of multiple functions in single spaces, and adaptation to local environmental conditions are all concepts that early forest masters pioneered and that modern planners are rediscovering. Green infrastructure projects, often unknowingly, replicate design principles that indigenous peoples developed thousands of years ago. Modern urban planning is learning from traditional approaches to landscape design. The creation of multifunctional green spaces that provide habitat, flood control, and recreational opportunities reflects principles that indigenous peoples used in landscape management. The integration of food production with other urban functions mirrors traditional approaches to forest gardening. Climate adaptation strategies in urban planning are incorporating traditional knowledge about managing environmental variability. Indigenous techniques for water management, flood control, and heat reduction are being adapted for urban environments. These approaches often prove more effective and resilient than conventional engineering solutions. The role of fire in ecosystem management, which early humans mastered so completely, is being recognized as essential for maintaining healthy landscapes. Worldwide, fire suppression policies that dominated 20th century land management are being replaced by approaches that recognize fire as a necessary ecological process. Traditional burning practices are being reintroduced in many regions to restore ecosystem health, and reduce wildfire risks. Fire management agencies are learning that traditional burning practices can reduce wildfire risks while improving ecosystem health. These practices create conditions that make catastrophic fires less likely while maintaining the ecological benefits that fire-adapted species require. The integration of traditional burning with modern fire management is producing more effective and cost-efficient approaches to landscape management. Prescribed burning programs are increasingly incorporating traditional knowledge about fire behavior, timing, and ecological effects. Indigenous fire practitioners are working with government agencies to design burning programs that achieve multiple objectives, reducing fire risks, improving wildlife habitat, enhancing plant diversity, and maintaining cultural connections to the land. International environmental policy is beginning to acknowledge the rights and knowledge of indigenous peoples who maintain forest management traditions into the modern era. The recognition that traditional ecological knowledge represents sophisticated science is changing how environmental decisions are made and who is included in planning processes. This shift represents a return to the collaborative, knowledge-based approaches that early forest masters pioneered. International agreements like the Convention on Biological Diversity now recognize indigenous peoples as critical partners in conservation efforts. These agreements acknowledge that indigenous territories contain the majority of the world's remaining biodiversity, and that traditional management practices are often more effective than conventional conservation approaches. This recognition is leading to increased support for indigenous land rights and management authority. Climate change agreements are beginning to recognize the role of traditional management practices in carbon sequestration and climate adaptation. Indigenous burning practices, agroforestry systems, and landscape management techniques are being recognized as important tools for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and building resilience to climate change impacts. The legacy of early human forest control extends beyond Earth to influence how humans think about managing environments in space. As we plan for human settlements on other planets, the principles of ecosystem engineering that early humans developed provide guidance for creating sustainable environments in challenging conditions. The same skills that allowed our ancestors to transform Earth's forests may be essential for establishing human communities on Mars or other worlds. Space habitat design is learning from traditional approaches to creating self-sustaining ecosystems. The principles of creating diverse, resilient systems that can maintain themselves over long periods are directly applicable to space colonization challenges. Traditional knowledge about maintaining life support systems using biological processes could be crucial for long-term space habitation. Closed-loop resource management systems planned for space missions mirror traditional approaches to sustainable resource use. Indigenous societies developed sophisticated systems for recycling nutrients, managing waste, and maintaining productive ecosystems without external inputs. These approaches provide models for creating sustainable life support systems in space. Environments. Archaeological preservation efforts are working to protect sites that document early human forest management achievements. These sites represent invaluable records of sustainable environmental management that could provide crucial insights for addressing contemporary environmental challenges. The techniques and knowledge preserved in these archaeological records may be essential for developing effective responses to climate change and environmental degradation. Archaeological sites containing evidence of traditional management practices are increasingly recognized as important cultural and scientific resources. These sites preserve detailed records of sustainable management techniques that could inform contemporary conservation efforts. Protecting these sites ensures that future generations will have access to this invaluable knowledge. Digital preservation efforts are working to document traditional ecological knowledge before it is lost. These projects are creating comprehensive databases of management techniques, ecological observations, and cultural practices that supported sustainable landscape management. This digital preservation ensures that traditional knowledge will remain available even if direct cultural transmission is interrupted. The story of early human forest control demonstrates that environmental challenges can be solved through knowledge, cooperation, and long-term thinking. Our ancestors faced environmental problems that seemed insurmountable. Vast, dangerous forests that blocked travel and harbored deadly predators, and developed solutions that not only solved immediate problems, but created more productive and beautiful landscapes for future generations. The problem-solving approaches developed by early forest masters provide models for addressing contemporary challenges. They demonstrated that complex environmental problems could be solved through systematic observation, careful experimentation, and adaptive management. Their success shows that human ingenuity can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles when supported by appropriate social institutions and long-term thinking. The collaborative approaches that early humans developed for landscape management provide templates for contemporary cooperation on environmental issues. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental degradation all require international cooperation and coordinated action on scales that mirror the regional cooperation that indigenous peoples achieved for landscape management. The techniques they developed: controlled burning, selective species management, ecosystem engineering, and collaborative resource management, remain relevant for contemporary environmental challenges. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental degradation all require the same types of innovative thinking, long-term planning, and cooperative action that early forest masters used to transform their world. Controlled burning techniques developed by indigenous peoples are being adapted for climate change mitigation and adaptation. These practices can reduce wildfire risks while maintaining carbon storage in vegetation and soils. They can also help ecosystems adapt to changing climate conditions by maintaining diverse habitat mosaics that provide refugia for climate-sensitive species. Ecosystem engineering principles pioneered by early humans are being applied to large-scale restoration projects. These projects are recreating natural processes that maintain ecosystem health and resilience. The same understanding of ecological relationships that allowed indigenous peoples to enhance landscape productivity is being used to restore degraded ecosystems and create resilient landscapes. Modern genetic research is revealing that humans carry evolutionary adaptations that developed in response to the environments created by early forest management. Our digestive systems, immune responses, and even cognitive capabilities were shaped by thousands of years of living in human-modified environments. We are, in a very real sense, products of the landscapes that our ancestors created. Genetic studies show that human populations have adapted to the foods that became available through landscape management. Our ability to digest certain plant foods, our resistance to specific diseases, and our responses to environmental stresses all reflect adaptations to the environments that indigenous peoples created through landscape management. Cognitive research suggests that human mental capabilities may have been enhanced by the complex problem-solving required for landscape management. The challenges of understanding ecological relationships, planning long-term management strategies, and coordinating complex social activities may have driven the evolution of human intelligence and social capabilities. The ultimate legacy of early human forest masters may be the demonstration that humans can improve upon nature through careful, knowledge-based intervention. Rather than seeing human impact as inevitably destructive, their achievements show that informed human management can create environments that are more productive, more beautiful, and more supportive of biodiversity than unmanaged natural systems. This optimistic perspective on human-environment relationships challenges prevailing narratives about environmental destruction and offers hope for addressing contemporary challenges. If properly managed, human activities can enhance rather than degrade natural systems. The key is learning from traditional approaches that emphasized long-term sustainability over short-term gain. The demonstration that humans can be positive forces in natural systems provides motivation for tackling contemporary environmental challenges. Rather than seeing environmental problems as inevitable consequences of human presence, we can understand them as management challenges that can be solved through appropriate knowledge and institutions. This optimistic view of human environment relationships provides hope for addressing contemporary environmental challenges. If our ancestors could transform entire continents using only fire and stone tools, surely we can develop solutions to current problems using modern knowledge and technology. The key is learning from their examples of sustainable, long-term thinking and collaborative action. Contemporary technology provides unprecedented capabilities for environmental management, but success still depends on the same principles that guided early forest masters: careful observation, long-term planning, adaptive management, and collaborative action. Modern tools are only effective when guided by wisdom about sustainable relationships between humans and nature. The integration of traditional knowledge with modern technology is producing innovative solutions to environmental challenges. Indigenous knowledge about ecological relationships provides guidance for applying modern technology effectively. Modern monitoring capabilities can help evaluate the effectiveness of traditional management techniques and adapt them to contemporary conditions. The forest masters of deep time left us more than modified landscapes. They left us a blueprint for living sustainably on Earth. Their achievements remind us that humans are capable of being positive forces in natural systems when we act with knowledge, wisdom, and concern for future generations. In an era of environmental crisis, their legacy offers both inspiration and practical guidance for creating a sustainable future. The blueprint for sustainability includes specific principles that remain relevant today: the importance of maintaining biodiversity, the need for adaptive management that responds to changing conditions, the value of long-term planning that considers impacts on future generations, and the necessity of collaborative institutions that can coordinate action across large scales. This blueprint also emphasizes the importance of understanding ecological relationships and working with natural processes rather than against them. The most successful traditional management practices enhance natural processes rather than replacing them. This approach offers guidance for developing technologies and management strategies that support, rather than undermine, natural systems. The legacy of the forest masters ultimately teaches us that the relationship between humans and nature doesn't have to be destructive. With appropriate knowledge, institutions, and values, humans can be positive forces that enhance the beauty, productivity, and resilience of natural systems. Their achievements provide both hope and practical guidance for creating a sustainable future in which humans and nature thrive together. This message of hope is particularly important in an era when environmental problems can seem overwhelming and insurmountable. The achievements of early forest masters demonstrate that humans have the capability to solve complex environmental challenges and create better outcomes for both people and nature. Their success provides motivation and confidence for tackling contemporary challenges with the same dedication, creativity, and long-term thinking that they applied to transforming the ancient world. As we return to the present day from our journey through deep time, the magnitude of early human achievement becomes clear. Those small groups of hunter-gatherers, armed with nothing more than fire and stone tools, accomplished something that seems almost impossible. They gained control over nature itself and reshaped entire continents according to their needs. The techniques they pioneered: controlled burning, ecosystem engineering, landscape architecture, and sustainable resource management, represent humanity's first great technological revolution. These innovations were every bit as transformative as agriculture, industry, or modern technology. In fact, they made all subsequent human achievements possible by creating the managed environments that could support larger populations and more complex societies. The world we inhabit today is fundamentally their creation. The forests, grasslands, and landscapes that we consider natural are actually human artifacts, carefully designed and maintained by skilled practitioners over thousands of years. When we walk through a forest, hunt in managed wildlife areas, or even navigate urban green spaces, we're experiencing environments that reflect principles pioneered by early forest masters. Their greatest achievement wasn't just the physical transformation of landscapes. It was the demonstration that humans could be positive forces in natural systems, rather than simply exploiting resources until they were exhausted. Early humans developed sustainable practices that enhanced environmental productivity while supporting growing human populations. They proved that careful management could make landscapes more beautiful, more productive, and more biodiverse than unmanaged natural systems. This legacy is more relevant today than ever before, as we face climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental degradation on a global scale. The principles developed by early forest masters offer hope and practical guidance. Their achievements remind us that environmental challenges can be solved through knowledge, cooperation, and long-term thinking. The story of early human forest control is ultimately a story about human potential. Our ancestors demonstrated that, with sufficient knowledge, determination, and cooperative effort, humans can solve even the most daunting environmental challenges. They transformed hostile, dangerous forests into productive, beautiful landscapes that supported thriving communities for thousands of years. As we stand at another environmental crossroads, their example provides both inspiration and direction. The same innovative thinking, collaborative action, and long-term planning that allowed early humans to master the wild forests may be exactly what we need to create a sustainable future for our modern world. The forest masters of deep time showed us what's possible when humans work with nature rather than against it, and their legacy lights the way forward into an uncertain but hopeful future.